We're going to talk some hockey, and we're going to talk about the fact that the Chicago Blackhawks just won their third Stanley Cup in the last 6 years. And right now, let's go to Skype and bring in a guy who covers the Blackhawks as well as everything else in Chicago for ESPNChicago.com. That's Jon Greenberg. Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm enjoying this conversation.
Okay, let's start on you, Jon. I don't like your shirt. I don't like the background there with the lights. And the Blackhawks were lucky because the Bishop had a torn groin and he couldn't play, so I don't consider
and the
this.
Blackhawks have been lucky 3 out of the last 6 years, Jon. No, that's a damn good team. I tell you what, as a kid who grew up in Chicago, watching the Blackhawks, my dad was a huge Blackhawks fan. It's just nice to see this franchise becoming what it used to be, and so much of that credit has to go to Bill Wirtz's son, Rocky Wirtz. If you don't mind, Jon, give everybody just a little bit of history and tell us how quickly Rocky Wirtz turned this franchise around after his father, Bill, died in 2007.
Well, it was fantastic. So it was really great timing on every end, because I joked in my column last night that maybe Bill Wirtz played the long con in the rebuilding, because they were so bad for so long, they got a chance to draft Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane in back-to-back drafts. Now, that's the real core of why this team's so good. And then, frankly, Bill Wirtz passed away, a long life, a very successful person, but basically passed away at the exact right time because the team was ascending. Rocky, it's
timely
true.
death. We always hear, we always hear of untimely death.
This was a timely death.
This was a timely death.
Because Rocky took over. He started putting the games on TV. He started slow as to not embarrass his dad's legacy. And then, he hired the right kind of executives because it was a really bad organization. They had no fans. Their season ticket sales, everything was terrible. They weren't putting home games were not on TV, folks. This is up till 2007. The home games were not televised because he was crazy. So everything kind of came together at the same time, and Rocky really modernized the organization, and it took off. I mean, just like a cannon. It just really took off. It's amazing.
We both felt here, Les and I, that Joel Quenneville was just a. Now I go back to talking about Mike Malone, but Joel Quenneville is a great coach, and he has come in there and he's cemented his spot in the Hall of Fame. I mean, what he's done with the Blackhawks.
He squeezes everything out of that team.
The type of guy he is. I wonder how much influence do you think he had on the organization and this team that now a lot of people are calling a dynasty?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think sometimes it doesn't get overlooked in Chicago, but because of the whole Rocky Wirtz stuff, sometimes that can take precedence because it's a romantic story, a guy taking over for his dad. But I wrote last night, how lucky are the Blackhawks? This whole thing that Joel Quenneville was available when he was available, because they needed, Denny Savard is a great Blackhawk. His legacy here is fantastic, but he wasn't that kind of coach. Joel Quenneville was available at the right time, and he's exactly the guy they needed. And you can't overstate his influence on this team and with these guys. I mean, he is the perfect coach. Like you said, he's cemented his legacy. As I'm leaving the United Center late last night in the basement, Joel walks by me with his family, and he's got a big lit cigar in his mouth and a bottle of Bud in his hand, and he just couldn't have been happier.
He is. You had to wait 77 years, you and Les's father and all of his relatives there, had to wait 77 years for the Stanley Cup to be won at home. And in 1938, I'm going to tell you guys something you don't know. In 1938, the Stanley Cup was not in Chicago, and it almost didn't make it to the stadium last night, to the United Center.
How crazy is that they didn't? I guess that's part of their weird traditions. I was thinking, why wasn't it here like at 9 a.m? They could have put it in Tibbs's old office, the Bulls across the street, if they want to hide it. That was crazy. They had to driving 100 miles an hour through flooded streets to get it there in time.
Sure, you could have called Uber, I think, and got it there a lot sooner than that if you were going to do that. I didn't understand that. I have respect for Cooper. He says last night, well, my goaltender had torn a groin, as I brought up, and one of my star players had a broken wrist, but we don't want to use excuses. The first thing out of his mouth was excuses of why they didn't win. Do you think and Bishop had a great series. I mean, he may have been hurting, but that was the first time with, 4 or 5 minutes to go that there was not a difference of more than one goal.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the way that Chicago finished that off. I mean, it was perfect for who was the MVP. It was perfect for the way that game ended in regard to your opinion about that.
Well, yeah, and think about that. I mean, with his torn groin, the Blackhawks never scored more than 2 goals in a game. That doesn't happen. Now, every game was close. Like you said, it was the first 2-goal lead is when Patrick Kane scores. Patrick Kane scored once, the whole series, and he's one of the best players in the world. So I think the way the series went down, how tight it was just fantastic. And the end last night gave Blackhawks fans a chance to breathe because they actually had a 2-goal lead for most of the third period. So there was a lot of chants of "We want the cup, we want the cup" at the United Center, and it really made for a fantastic environment.
Yeah, and I'm wondering why Cooper didn't call a timeout. I mean, really? Do you want to take it into the offseason, your timeout? You got a timeout there. At least try and set up a play. You've got, a 2-man advantage there, and you don't have some play in your pocket you've been saving for the Stanley Cup Finals? Forgive me, that's
I agree,
not a
Woody. He should have went with the score-goal play. The score-goal play never, always works, right?
That one works a lot. Hey,
Yeah.
John.
Number three.
John,
Never used it before.
as young as Taves and Kane are, Joel Quenneville, I'm sure, is going to be signing a contract extension soon if he hasn't already. Is there any reason to believe the Blackhawks will not do this at least 1 or 2 more times in the near future?
Well, I mean, obviously the odds are that they will. 3 and 6 years. I mean, Patrick Kane said it last night. You got to enjoy everyone equally because you don't know if you'll get back. I mean, you don't know what's in the future. I mean, look at their other tenants in the United Center, the Bulls. When Derrick Rose goes to the conference finals in his MVP year, we're like, oh, they'll be back. And it hasn't worked out like that. So I think they should be. They're going to lose some players this year, but they have a lot of young players in this lineup and in the organization that should fill the roles. I absolutely think I will see another Stanley Cup Finals in my lifetime at least.
He's Jon Greenberg. He writes
Maybe
for,
not mine.
He,
Maybe yours too, Woody.
he writes for ESPNChicago.com. What's your Twitter handle, John?
It's Jon_Greenberg.
All right. I read you all the time. Really appreciate
Thanks,
your
man. I
stuff.
appreciate it.
And appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Woody.
Jon
Thanks,
Greenberg.